Long-term AI in law is not about equipping lawyers. It's about empowering non-lawyers to conduct legal work for themselves.
You need to be a lawyer to know if you need a lawyer.
Yeah.
That's going to change.
Yes, absolutely. We are essentially equipping many of our young lawyers for the 20th century rather than for the 21st century. Who develops these systems? Who ensures they're up to date? Who tests these systems? We as humans, as we've done throughout the history of humanity, will respond to opportunities and adapt as necessary.
Welcome to Legal AI Lab. My name is Hidde Bruinsma, joined by my co-host Martijn Doornbos of Legal Mike. Our guest, Professor Richard Susskind. He's president of the Society for Computers and Law, and in 2024 became the Commonwealth Special Envoy for Justice and AI. He authored 11 books, including his new book, How to Think About AI and Tomorrow's Lawyers. We explore how legal education should respond to AI, the lawyer's role in the future, and how AI changes the access to justice. Welcome to Legal AI Lab with Richard Susskind.
This podcast is brought to you by Legal Mike, the smartest AI assistant build specifically for the Dutch legal practice. Thorough, intuitive, and secure. Want to discover how Legal Mike can boost your practice? Visit legalmike.ai and start today.
Richard, welcome.
Good
It's
to
an
be
honor
here.
to have you in the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, we are both from the Netherlands, and a few weeks ago there was an opinion piece in one of the biggest newspapers in the Netherlands of two teachers on a university, a legal university, and they were talking about the use of ChatGPT and AI in legal education. And their conclusion was we should ban legal AI, we should ban ChatGPT from the law schools. And I want to start this conversation with your view on their opinion about using AI, using ChatGPT in legal education and at law schools. What is your view on that?
Well, it's certainly a controversial view, and it's one, as I think you might expect, I don't fully agree. In fact, I agree with very little of it. I think it raises far broader issues, though. On the one hand, it indicates that there is tremendous strength of feeling about the issue of AI in law. People really feel strongly.
They have a strong opinion on it.
Absolutely. And I encourage and welcome that. And I welcome debate as well. But I think the broader issue it raises, which I'm hoping we'll discuss, is what are we training young lawyers to become? Okay. And I think we need to give deep thought to what it is that will be required of the law and legal services in the very different world into which we're venturing. And it's only then that we can begin to give serious thought to how it is that we prepare the next generation of legal professionals, if indeed there will be another generation of legal professionals that are recognizable as professionals in the traditional one-to-one consultative advisory spirit. So I think simply to dismiss the technology before we've had the wider debate about where the technology is going, where the world of law, the entire ecosystem from dispute resolution to legal advisory to access to justice, until we've thought through what the law might look like in an AI-enabled digital world, I think it's premature to be rejecting the technology. But focusing more specifically, I think historically and as a matter of common sense, it seems to me that to reject a technology that is clearly so very powerful and so very useful for so many will be to ill-equip the next generation of lawyers. And so I understand the instinct, and from what I have read of these experts, they feel strongly passionately about the nature of law, the nature of legal problem solving. They value the rule of law. None of this is in dispute. They believe, as so many people believe in other disciplines, that the way we have worked in the past is worth preserving. But what I and others would say is that the world over, our legal system is creaking. For most people, legal services and dispute resolution, for example, are unaffordable. Mm-hmm. They're too combative, they take too long, somehow out of step in a digital society. And so as I and others, yourselves, are rethinking the way we might improve legal services, we need to keep an open mind to how it is that we train the next generation of lawyers.
Yeah, so maybe they go a bit too fast. I mean, we need to take a few steps back and have a broader discussion first before we're going to decide.
I think that's
decide
right.
on, like, are we going to forbid the use of AI in legal education?
What I don't know, because I don't know the individuals, is the extent to which they absolutely mean what they say, or whether or not they're encouraging a welcome debate. Because the debate about what it is our future lawyers will do.
But there was a lot of debate because of the
Absolutely,
of the
and
opinions.
it raised a great deal of interest. And again, I encourage this. But if you're asking me, do I think that the next generation of lawyers should not be exposed to emerging and existing AI? Of course, I can't agree with that.
No, but if we then look at the legal curriculum, because some of your colleagues said that there is no space in the legal curriculum. The curriculum is full. We don't have the space, we don't have the time to teach legal students about those new technologies because they need to focus on the things that they need to know for the law. And I think, like, okay, that for me that feels like a very strange opinion. I think we should make time, we should make space to create new pieces of education within the legal system, within the legal education system.
I have sympathy with law professors who worry about their packed curriculum. I'm a law professor myself. And I think we would all be disturbed if basic legal concepts, basic legal courses were no longer being taught. But I share your view that it's hard to imagine that we are equipping our lawyers of the future sufficiently if we're not exposing them to this latest technology. My view on the extent to which we should expose them has changed over time. When I wrote the first edition of my book, Tomorrow's Lawyers, I was saying, surely we must at least offer students the option of two kinds of courses. One is what you could broadly call legal futures studies, so that young lawyers and aspiring lawyers could be exposed to the latest thinking on where the legal world might be going. What is the future of dispute resolution? What might practicing lawyers be doing in the future? How fundamentally will legal systems be transformed? These are issues that I think any law student should be considering. But at that time, I thought, well, it's sufficient to have an option in that course. And the other thing I said is there are a number of emerging new disciplines like legal risk management or legal project management or legal knowledge engineering. And I said, again, students who are paying to equip themselves for a future career should at least have the option to study these emerging techniques, to somehow acquire these new skills. As my book, Tomorrow's Lawyers, gone into its second and third edition, I've moved away from thinking that these subjects should be optional. It seems to me that any student who is studying law simply must be immersed in the kinds of arguments that I and others have been making in our books and our articles, in our research. It would be absurd not to be curious at the very least about the impact of technology in law. But this has changed so much, even in the period during which that book has been in publication. I think people were not compelled by the argument, say 2012, 2013, that legal technology was central to the future of legal services. Now, pretty much, most people are saying, yes, this is vital. So we need to find space.
We
it
need to
doesn't
make
seem
space.
to me it's no longer an option. And again, not unlike in law firms, the question for me is not really, can we somehow adjust at the edges what it is we do? Can we squeeze a bit of legal technology in? I think we need to be asking more fundamental questions. Yeah. Do we need to root and branch transform law firms, transform law faculties and law schools? Because, and we'll get onto this, if we do believe that our AI systems will have a profound effect on what we call today the practice of law, the administration of justice, it may simply be inadequate to think that some tinkering with the curriculum or some mild adjustment of the structure of a law firm will do. And you'll know from my work that I think something far more fundamental is at play here. And I say that advisedly. I really do think we're living at a time, and tell me if this is an appropriate time to discuss this, but we're living at a time where two very different stories are unfolding. And I've not really told the story in this way, or the stories in this way. So the first story is, in a way, one of legal anthropology. And I talked about this in 1996 in my book, The Future of Law, where I relied on the work of a gentleman called Walter Ong. And he identified that humanity had so far evolved through three different stages. The first stage was the age of orality, where the only way we really had to communicate was by speaking with one another. Then came the era of script, when we could write and use other symbols to capture and represent our ideas and to communicate. And then came the era of print. And as we moved, as humans moved from one of these phases to the next, the underpinning structure of our legal systems changed fundamentally. How we created law, how we resolved disputes, how people were able to understand the law, how they were guided in the law, changed absolutely fundamentally. And we're now moving into a fourth stage, a digital society, an AI-enabled digital society, which urges me to think that we should expect not just some mild change at the edges, but a change in how we legislate, how we resolve disputes, how we structure and organize the entire legal system, or legal ecosystem, that is analogous, for example, to the shift from a script-based society to a print-based society. So that's one direction of thought. That's one story. There is another story, and we can tell it in a variety of ways. And the story, I think the most recent version we know, was when we moved from essentially an agrarian and agriculture-based society to some kind of industrial society, or even earlier, we moved from a hunter-gatherer society to some kind of agricultural society. Again, we saw fundamental change in community, in society, in our political and economic and legal institutions. And we saw this so clearly in the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution gave rise, for example, to what we call the modern professions. So that's another story that is unfolding. And what we're seeing at this moment in time, and this has never happened before, is that these two stories are occurring at the same time. It's as though the printing press had been invented in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. So we're seeing a revolution in the way we capture and share and communicate information on the one hand, and we're seeing a revolution in the underpinning economic models, how we produce value, moving away from a labor-based model to essentially a model of production that is based on intellectual capital, on the reproduction of information and intellectual content. Now, I say all of this, again, to underpin the point that I don't see what's going on here as a simple automation of the way we currently practice law or resolve disputes or train young lawyers. I see this as a fundamental shift in the nature of society, the nature of the community, in fact, the nature of humanity.
There was a few weeks ago, there was someone of Google who said, your law study, your law diploma that you get from your study will be worthless in the future.
Well, it depends whether or not you think that in learning law, you're simply memorizing, as it were, particular pieces of legislation or case law or particular processes and procedures. I think most of us who teach law think we're teaching an intellectual discipline, a way of tackling problems, a way of analyzing issues, a way of reasoning and problem solving, a way of communicating. Now, it may well be that these very skills are those that AI systems can replace or can outperform us. But I don't want to take too limited a view on what it is that a legal education provides. I think it's more a mindset and an intellectual set of tools that we're provided with rather than knowledge of the law at any particular moment in time. But if I'm right and we're on the verge of a major shift in the nature of law and its administration in society, I take the point. We are essentially equipping many of our young lawyers for the 20th century rather than for the 21st century. But I want to pull this together again and say something which I think is often not recognized. There's great enthusiasm just now for legal technology, for artificial intelligence and law, for how it is that people could be more profitable, for how it is we can change the way we meet legal needs. What I'm saying is all of that may be true, but actually there's something far more fundamental going on, that what is happening in the world of artificial intelligence is a fundamental societal shift. Mm-hmm. And with all historic societal shifts, we find a fundamental shift too in the nature of law and how it is administered. So we shouldn't be surprised if so many of the techniques and tools and methods and institutions that we value so deeply today over time will, in one way or another, either be replaced or changed very, very considerably. I think there's also, at this stage in our discussion, an observation that's worth making about timing, that I distinguish quite clearly between the advance of technology and the adoption of technology. Mm-hmm. Although the technology is advancing at a ferocious rate, we know that for a whole bundle of reasons, the adoption of technology in law and elsewhere often trails behind. Yeah. Now, they may be regulatory reasons, it may be cultural reasons, it may be ethical reasons, but a lot of the legal technology community, in their enthusiasm, confuse what's technologically possible today with what's likely to happen in the near future. And I think I've been around the field for more than 40 years, long enough to see that self-evidently beneficial technologies are not always immediately taken up by the profession. And I appreciate too that much that I'm saying, for example, from the point of view of the law firm, is very challenging. Most law firms, certainly major law firms, have enjoyed 2-3 decades of remarkable commercial success. If the model shifts in the way that I and others anticipate, this is deeply threatening. For some, they perceive it as an opportunity, but that's rarer. Most people, understandably, want to continue on the successful route that they have journeyed on for so many years. So there are some economic disincentives to immediate adoption as well. So while I do talk very broadly about pervasive, transformative, irreversible change, I'm also realistic in thinking that both in law firms and in our court systems, these changes are not going to happen overnight.
I want to zoom in on the role of the young lawyer. So you have been through the legal education, and then you will be a young lawyer. You want to have some experience, you want to do some work. And I asked 2 legal AI experts from the Netherlands if they have a question for you. And one of them is Nora Streep. She's the executive manager of the law firm school in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. And she's doing a lot of education for young lawyers. And she has a question for you about the role of young lawyers.
Hello, Richard. It's clear that the rise of AI will have major consequences for the legal profession. I'm curious about your vision for legal education, both university and vocational. What do you envision the curriculum to look like, and what role do you see for hard knowledge in it? I'm also curious how you think the training gap can be closed in practice. The gap that arises because young lawyers can no longer learn the profession at their own pace with simple cases, but must immediately perform at a higher level because AI has already handled all the easy tasks and cases.
And I think we already answered the first part of her question, but it's mostly the second part of her question. Young lawyers, after their study, they will land at a law firm. And what we now see in research is that a lot of their roles, their functions, the things they do in the beginning to also have the experience, is taking over by AI. AI is doing a lot of that work. There was some research that paralegals will maybe disappear in the future. What is your view on then you've been through the law school, you are a young lawyer, you're working at a law firm, you want to have some experience, and then AI is stepping into the game and it's taking away a lot of work that you normally do.
So there's so many different issues here, and I don't think the question really is primarily one of legal education. Again, I say to you, and this goes back to the debate about those who say we shouldn't be using AI in legal education. We have to take a step back and try and envisage how legal service is going to unfold. And only once we've got that vision does it help to say, how do we prepare people for that world? So let me distinguish, and I think it's an important distinction, between short-term AI in law and long-term AI in law. I'm going to take, and thank you for the question, I'm going to take quite a long run up at this because it's fundamental. And part of what I think I'm saying in a lot of these debates is that people are not asking the wrong questions, but they're not lifting their eyes up sufficiently and asking the big questions. So in the short term, by which I mean over the next 2 or 3 years or 3 or 4 years, what, in my view, the main impact of AI is going to be is essentially in what I say is automating how we currently work. I think the focus is going to be on AI for lawyers, a tool to make them more productive, to make them more efficient, to make their work more consistent. And for many lawyers and for legal educationalists, this is reassuringly familiar. This is a good thing. We've got a great new tool. It's a more powerful tool than we've ever had in the past, but this will help us turbocharge our business. We can be more productive, more efficient, more profitable. This is terribly exciting. That's the view of the short term, that what it is essentially perpetuating or continuing our current ways of working. Mm-hmm. So in the courts and law firms, we're going to have these powerful tools which will improve the work of lawyers. Longer term, I think we're going to see something far more complex.
Different landscape, different players.
Different world, really. And what I say in my book is we have to distinguish between automation on the one hand and innovation and elimination on the other hand. And I need to explain a little bit about this. So for me, the idea of innovation is using AI to allow us to do things that previously were not possible. And the idea of elimination is when AI is going to take away not the jobs, although that may happen, but will take away the problems for which lawyers used to exist. The best example I can give here is in healthcare. So many people, when they're talking about AI, think that the future of surgery is robotic surgery. And they're not wrong in thinking that robotic surgery will be important, but that is an example of what I call task automation, where people in the world of AI look at a particular job, they look at the tasks involved, and they say, where can we take out a human and plug in a machine? And you'll have seen many academic researchers, many management consultants, many economists making predictions about the future of jobs on that basis. They say, if very few of the tasks you undertake could be undertaken by an AI system, then your job's quite secure. If many of the tasks that you undertake could be undertaken by a machine, then your job's under threat. And they look at young lawyers and they say, so much of what you do is routine, repetitive, process-based research that we're already seeing AI systems undertaking these tasks. And so they say the future of the young lawyer is prejudiced. Now, I think that's a really limited view of the future of employment, the future of AI, because in healthcare, the most exciting use of AI is not in automating what we already do. In surgery, for example, it is in what we call non-invasive therapy. Mm-hmm. That's to say, solving the problem without cutting the body open. And there's lots of techniques being developed, partly AI-based, partly other technologies, which are helping us give the patient the outcome they require in a way that's cheaper, it's quicker, it's less painful, it's less intrusive, and so forth. So I say in law, we have to think, what's the equivalent of that form of innovation? Not automating what we currently do, but it's the new products, services, ideas that we have, many of which we haven't yet invented, that by analogy give the client, give the consumer the outcome they want in a way that's cheaper, less complex, less intrusive, less painful, and so forth. But more than that is the idea in healthcare of preventative medicine.
Exactly, yeah.
And there's so much work going on there, AI-based to some extent, where we're trying to essentially prevent health problems arising, which means we won't need much of the current medical infrastructure we have. If we can put the fence at the top of the cliff rather than the ambulance at the bottom, we're not problem solving, we're problem avoiding. And again, in law, there's a very strong analogy. And this is what general counsel say to me all the time. We don't want a big problem well resolved. We want to avoid the pitfalls.
Exactly.
And so the future for me of legal service is not simply AI-based task automation. We'll have that over the next few years.
We already
in
have
the
it.
long run, and we do. We see
I
it
mean, we have
emerging.
Garfield AI here now in London, where they have
In-
one lawyer,
Yeah.
and the rest is AI.
And that's one example,
Of course,
of,
but
of,
it was-
of innumerable.
It was an example that made the newspapers.
Indeed, which is not of itself the most significant factor. I'm not passing comment on that particular system, but the newspapers do tend to fasten on particular stories. I think to look at it more deeply, what I'm saying is that we will be able through AI to solve a whole set of categories of problems that we haven't been able to solve in the past. We'll be able to solve them differently, and we'll be able to help people avoid legal problems in the first place. And this is the kind of landscape I'm anticipating. So long-term AI is not about, and this is the most vital point I'll probably make today, long-term AI in law is not about equipping lawyers. It's about empowering non-lawyers to conduct legal work for themselves.
And eliminating legal problems.
In the first place.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so innovation in law is equipping these individuals and these organizations to do work that in the past they would have called upon for lawyers to do. And that's the major transformation. It's not just happening in law, it's happening everywhere. It'll happen in education, it'll happen in healthcare, it'll happen in business, where, and this is that's the great excitement of AI, that it's empowering people to do work for themselves that historically would have required deep expertise and deep pockets as well.
But if I'm now a
considerable
lawyer and I'm
expenditure.
listening to this, then I maybe will be afraid to lose my job.
Well, let's follow the argument through. And this is me building what I was saying earlier, that what we're seeing here is not simply a mild shift. We're seeing a seismic change. And so we follow it through. We're moving to a society in which the professions are required less. There's various ways of looking at this. I look at it top down. What I'm trying to do is take you on a journey here. I mean, others will want to talk about systems to draft documents and systems. Yeah. That's not what
We'll
you're...
have those
that's
interviews.
not what I'm on your show to discuss.
No.
So let's take it... so at a very high level, you get these economic shifts. You've got these major shifts in the way information is communicated. And what I'm saying at a slightly lower level is the very nature of professional service is going to change. And I wrote a book with my son Daniel in 2015 called The Future of the Professions. And that was an early attempt, because it was 10 years ago now, to look at the impact of AI in professional service. But the question we asked, and I know this is a very long response to the question I was asked by someone who's interested in legal education. But the question we were asking is, why do we have the professions at all? Why do the professions exist? And we identified, in fact, it's a very long introductory chapter, a whole bundle of reasons for having the professions. But the professions exist to solve a fairly clear category of problem in society. And the problem is one of knowledge, that most people don't have the knowledge and experience in a complex society to solve their big problems themselves, their health problems, their legal problems, their finance problems. And what we've done is we've evolved this institution or this approach, this method called the professions, where we train people, we pay them handsomely, I call it the grand bargain. In return for the prestige, the payment, and so forth, we have these trusted advisors who keep their knowledge up to date, and they are the people who essentially share knowledge and expertise in society. Now, the big point here is the professions don't exist in nature. We've created them. They're a construct. And you keep on saying to me, and I understand it, what are lawyers going to think? The law's not there to provide a livelihood for lawyers any more than ill health is there to provide a living for doctors. It's not the purpose of these problems to keep this category of human or occupational group, the professions in business. We as humans, as we've done throughout the history of humanity, will respond to opportunities and adapt as necessary.
But how can they adapt then to the new role? Also,
I want to follow through the argument. What I'm taking on is this journey of thought, and then we'll see where is the new opportunities. And I will answer your question. But what I'm saying is that we have to take a wider view of how we might share knowledge and expertise in society. And until AI systems came along, there wasn't really an option to using other human beings. And so that's why there's been such phenomenal global market demand. We have massive problems and we have to call upon human experts to sort them out. So the challenge we're facing is that there are new ways of sharing expertise and knowledge in society. And if you think of access to justice, the horror globally that most people can't afford to instruct lawyers, most people have no way of understanding, of asserting, of enforcing their entitlements. Yeah. But now we're seeing through AI systems and early AI systems in law, and I believe all of them are early, are giving us hope there might be different ways of solving legal problems. Now, again, I say to you, the response of many lawyers here is, well, what does this mean for lawyers? What does it mean for law students? What does it mean for judges and courts? It's interesting when there's a breakthrough in medicine, the question that people don't ask is, what does this mean for doctors? They think, what does it mean for patients? So I want to push back on this. I understand everyone listening in and say, what am I going to be doing in life in the future? But I want to take you on the broader path so you understand the contours of this landscape. So the contours are a world of long-term AI where this is empowering people to solve legal problems for themselves. And I have to tell you that many, if not most, in-house legal departments, and certainly the boards with whom I speak, are engaged and enthused by this vision, as the whole access to justice community. At last, here's a way we can help individuals. So let's now answer your question.
Lawyers offer different types of services. They can assist with a dispute. They can solve a complex contract or provide a complex contract to you. They can provide advice about a corporate manner. There's lots of services that lawyers provide. Is there any specific service that you identify as a service that could potentially be eliminated as the first one because the people that seek access to justice are empowered to solve their problem themselves?
Well, there's lots of examples of that. I'm not sure it's the right question. I think your question is focusing on what I call process rather than outcome. Your starting point of the question are the services that lawyers provide. My starting point of all of this is what outcomes do we need to solve. But
Sure.
But to answer your question, I view access to justice under three headings that are: how do you understand your legal entitlements? And we're seeing systems now that immediately can help people understand what their rights and duties are.
Yeah.
More than this, I see, secondly, access to justice about how do you assert your entitlements. That's often why we go to lawyers, that we can look up and maybe understand what our legal position is, but to articulate that position, to persuade, whether it be another party or a court or whoever, of that legal position requires skills that most non-lawyers can't get from a textbook or from a Google search. But now we have, through even existing systems like ChatGPT, we can ask the system to write a draft letter, perhaps asking for a flight has been cancelled, I'd like compensation.
Sure.
Could you write a letter? So the ability to assert one's legal entitlements. And thirdly, and this has been a focal point of my career, we are developing techniques to help people resolve legal disputes without going through the traditional mechanisms of dispute resolution. Now, that might be in the future AI-based resolution, but in the short term, it might be what I call online courts, which is the idea that there's no physical hearing, there's no physical courtroom. Disputes are resolved by an exchange of arguments and evidence online. So I give that as examples to answer your question, but I want to go back to the big picture, if I may, to answer your question. So the big picture is we're seeing a change in the nature of economic life. We're seeing a change in the way we communicate. We're seeing a challenge to the professions as the dominant way of sharing knowledge and expertise in society. And so what I'm saying in the long term is this means that individuals will be empowered to undertake activities for themselves. The question then one asks is, what value in the broadest of terms might legal professionals provide in this new landscape? And that's a very different question from what are how will lawyers draft documents or how will they undertake legal research. I'm saying in this new world, what value might the legal profession, and I say that in the broadest of terms because I think the work of traditional lawyers is going to fade. But is there some scope? Is there some opportunity lurking in this new world? And my thinking here is, and I know for many lawyers this is not appealing, but my thinking here is the mindset we need is to be building the systems that replace our old ways of working. I've said to you that I believe AI systems will be able, for example, to help people understand, assert and enforce their entitlements. Who develops these systems? Who ensures they're up to date? Who tests these systems? Who gives the market confidence that these systems have been subject to appropriate assurance tests and so forth? This, for me, is the role of tomorrow's professionals. That at least for a certain number of years, and I'm not prepared to commit, the great opportunity is to build the systems that replace our old ways of working. Because in, for example, major companies, these systems won't spontaneously arise, and in-house legal departments, for example, won't have the resources to develop these systems. So all the major law firms I'm advising, what I'm talking to them about is what tools might you develop and deliver that will empower clients in the way I'm anticipating. So what I'm saying is you move away from being a consultative advisor to being an organization that designs, develops, implements, sells, and maintains systems. Now, many lawyers say to me, hang on a second, I'm not a techie. My response to which I think is in two parts. I think it'll be quite hard in the future in any job not to be to some extent technical. But the bigger point I would make is you are a content provider. Now, that's not the way you've looked at your work in the past. You know, I'm not a content provider, but that in fact is what you are. And what I'm saying is there's a new way of delivering content. Now, do you, as a legal business, want to carry on delivering content in the old way, or do you want to deliver it in the new way? Or there's another way of putting it. Do you want to compete with these emerging systems, or do you want to build them? So by competing with them, you'd be saying something like this. You'd be saying, well, you know, I hear what Richard says, and it's he's been saying this kind of stuff for years. It's never going to happen. He doesn't really understand what I do. These AI systems could never copy what I do. I'm pretty safe. In fact, what we do in our firm and what I want to do personally is do all the things that machines can't do. And that I say is competing with AI. And I think it's a dreadful strategy, because if you believe these systems are becoming increasingly capable, and all the evidence suggests they are, you're painting yourself into a corner. There'll just be less and less that humans will be able to do that machines can't do. So the challenge there, it seems to me, is not to compete with these systems, it's to build these systems.
Or to work together with them.
I think you're going back, you're lapsing, and I understand it, into short-term AI, which is saying that the future is lawyers using these systems. I'm saying the real opportunity, and this is the one that interests the Big Four, this is the one that interests the alternative legal service providers. This is the ones that interest private equity and VC. This is the ones that interest the legal technology companies, and there's thousands of them worldwide, is not just to provide tools for lawyers, it's to provide tools that, in the broadest of terms, replace what we do as lawyers. So this gets me, we're now at a place, frankly, where we can answer the question. Because if the landscape is a world where the market need is for AI-based systems that can help people with their legal issues, the market opportunity, in my view, is to have the skills and tools to develop these systems. And that's why in Tomorrow's Lawyers, I identify 15 of these skills. And I've mentioned some of them earlier, whether it be the legal knowledge engineer, or I can add the legal data scientist, or the legal design thinker. There's a whole bundle of new skills that we're going to require in the legal profession if we're going to be the people who build these systems. And so in answer to the early question, the curriculum, yes, of course, I will have a core curriculum that familiarizes people with the core legal concepts, but I want much of the curriculum of tomorrow's legal professionals to be equipping these professionals with the various skills and talents they'll require to be involved in building these systems. Now, any of you who've thought even further ahead will know, and I have complete sympathy with this, that if you believe that in the long run, AI systems will themselves develop the next generation of systems, then over time, even this new role for the legal professional will fade. But that'll be, I suspect, in the late 30s, early 40s. If we're asking what we should be training young lawyers to do just now, I think it's to help build the systems that replace our old ways of working. Possibly one of the longest answers in history. But you see, what I'm trying to discourage in the legal world is what I rather, I suppose, critically call surface thinking about AI. Yeah. People have their very strong instincts. Oh, AI can never replace what I do, or oh, we've got to do this in the legal world. We really have to have a far more sophisticated discussion. And what I try to do in my new book is expand at far greater length in the concepts I've just been introducing. So I'm a top-down thinker. I'm interested in trying to understand the broad principles, the broad trends at play, and then think down, what does this mean in particular? A lot of other people, and there's just different ways of thinking, think bottom up. They think, okay, what tool can I use to do this task or that task? Now, you can interview people who can think about that, and there's some amazing young legal technology to do that, but that's not what you're going to get from me.
No, I want to take it back to something you said before, because also in the past you said about you need to be a lawyer to know if you need a lawyer.
Yeah.
That's going to change.
Yes, absolutely. See, that's very interesting. You quote that. I mean, that was one of the things I wrote in 1996 in my book about the future of law. I call it the paradox of traditional reactive service. So the idea here was that whether you're a business or individual, what I was noting is this really annoying habit from the point of view of the lawyer, where the client comes to you too late. And you say, oh gosh, I wish you'd come to me a few weeks early. But from the client's point of view, that's an enormously annoying thing to say, because how would we know? How did I know that I needed legal help? Yeah. You often need legal insight to know if or when best to consult a lawyer.
I think if you go to the hospital and you have cancer, they don't say to you, you should have come 3 years earlier.
Yeah. Well, they may have said, they wouldn't.
Yeah, but it wouldn't say it in the same way as a lawyer.
They wouldn't say it at the same moment. But I think it's a good reply to someone who, and it would be entirely thoughtless and insensitive to say it, but at some stage you'd be thinking, for example, a horrible diagnosis of prostate cancer, you'd be thinking, did you have your PSA test? There are tests now, preventative medicine, which will allow us to recognize early that you've got a problem, and early diagnosis will allow us to solve the problem. And so these are questions people are asking. And what I'm saying are, what are the tools we're going to develop in law that can provide the early warning systems in law? The thing that really interests me here is the idea, let's talk about big clients and big organizations, that you might have bots or agents roaming around the information systems. That's to say, not just the financial systems, but the email systems, the document systems of major organizations, doing in law what we also do in medicine, which is, say, for example, you have a blood test. What you're trying to do is find an early marker of disease, an early indicator of disease. Now, I reckon we'll have AI systems that will be able to roam around the information systems of major organizations and find early markers of legal problems. They'll say there's perhaps a competition law issue emerging there, a breach of contract over there. I think there's a regulatory issue there, defamation, employment. And what we will be able to do is the dream of, I believe, most in-house counsel and certainly of most business people to avoid legal problems rather than solve legal problems. And so that won't require the non-lawyer to have insight into legal issues. So to some extent, AI will, if not resolve, it will dissolve the paradox of traditional legal service, reactive legal service. This is something I've been going on about for ages. I think I first wrote about it in the Financial Times in the early 90s about the whole idea of a shift away from legal problem solving to legal risk management. And the truth is everyone thinks, yeah, it's a good idea, but we haven't really the tools to allow us to do it. We will have the tools now. But these tools similarly for individuals, for individual citizens, people who have, I use the term in the broadest term, a grievance, a problem, an issue. They don't even know if it's a legal issue, but they can dump some emails or some documents into the hopper, as it were, and the system will be able to identify the extent to which a problem's a legal problem or perhaps a problem of some other sort. One of the great skills we have as professionals, of course, is categorizing problems. That's what we're really good at. We're good at identifying.
And seeing problems.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's perhaps the same issue, that once we know what the problem is, we've compartmentalized it, the legal answer often follows quite clearly.
I once interviewed someone about the lawyer's brain, and she told me those people see problems everywhere, also in normal life.
Well, that's a different thing. That's more of a mindset issue. I'm a bit like that as well. I think it's quite hard to be trained as a lawyer and not to identify potential legal issues. That's why I think most of us as lawyers are not natural entrepreneurs because we see risk too readily. It was interesting in my first ride in a self-driving car in California, in San Francisco.
This summer?
No, it wasn't. It was last year. But in fact, this summer I've used them all the time. I love Waymo cars. My strong preference is to use a driverless taxi rather than.
You're not afraid?
No, not at all. Not at all. I thought I would be. I mean, in truth, let me flesh this out a bit. When I first went in one, I was very apprehensive beforehand. And when I sat in the car and you see the steering wheel move and there's no one there, you think, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? But again, within a few minutes of being in this car, it did, it's in the United States, a complex left turn. It was a hill start. It did it so effortlessly, flawlessly, that I immediately had confidence in the system. And I've just come to feel entirely comfortable, more comfortable, I think, in a driverless car. But my point was that it was very hard the first time I sat on it not to think of the liability implications of it crashing. Now, that's not a normal way of looking at things in life, but that's the lawyer's way of looking at it.
But is it also not then with individual citizens, the first time they use a system where there's no lawyer, there's no one at the steering wheel?
Well, I think also there's a very key distinction to be drawn between what I call unmet legal need and poorly met legal need. So poorly met legal need is legal need where we've got lawyers working today, but for one reason or another, the customer's not that satisfied. And it might have nothing to do with the quality of the advice. It maybe just it takes too long, or it's just far too expensive, or it's phrased in a way I don't understand or whatever. Unmet legal needs a different category where, again, and we've touched on this, people don't have the money to pay for the legal service. And in my view, for example, ChatGPT, as people are now using it for legal purposes, if you have no other way of addressing your legal issue, I don't think there's a nervousness there. I think for most people, well, we might as well have a go. Now, many people listening in will say, of course, these systems are based on data that's biased, or these systems hallucinate and make mistakes, and this is dreadful. But we have to recognize, and I'm part of this legal world, that our current offering is unaffordable. Exactly. We have to recognize that it's inaccessible. We have to understand that it's unintelligible for many people. And if we see emerging, and we are seeing emerging, tools that in due course will be good enough, and they're not quite good enough yet, the market will show no loyalty at all to conventional lawyers if they're finding their problems solved in a way that's cheap and cheerful, quick, convenient, and so forth.
But I think we also should protect individual citizens when using also those systems. There was a quite recent report from the British Law Commission about AI as a legal entity, that we should, the same as what they do with rivers now in some places in the world, they give those rivers a legal entity. So those rivers can now, of course, with the help of people, can start cases against big companies who are dumping oil in those rivers.
Yeah.
And there are now people who say we also should make sure that AI has a legal entity, so we can also be protected as individual citizens from the use of AI and also legal AI.
Yeah, going back to your earlier question, I completely agree, or observation, that we have to, you didn't phrase it this way, but we have to, I think, find ways of offering assurance to the public that these systems are reliable. That's another role for tomorrow's legal professions, that quality assurance role. Interestingly, however, you could see, for example, the Big Four a better place to do this because it's almost an audit assurance function rather than a conventional legal function. But whoever does the job, that's another role, at least in the interim, for lawyers. Yes, I think the bigger question, to be honest, is the extent to which AI systems will need to be accorded some kind of legal personality. And again, I cover this in my new book. We have traditionally felt that humans as legal persons are capable of rational choice. They're capable of independent thought, and we can hold them responsible broadly for all and only their intentional, conscious decisions. In the broadest of terms, that's our theories of legal responsibility. I used to teach legal philosophy. I know it's a lot more complex than that. But one of the issues with our machines and our systems is that even if they're very high performing, there are very few people today, not none, but there are very few people who would say they're thinking and conscious and self-aware and make intentional decisions. Nonetheless, the impact of autonomous AI systems could be profound. And I think we haven't really begun to wrestle with the issue about what legal rights and duties we will need to accord AI systems as individuals. In some ways, I like and a couple of people explore this analogy in different ways in the AI world. Stuart Russell's one, Yuval Harari's another, but the idea of AI systems as a kind of alien. Stuart Russell's point, I think it's Stuart Russell makes the point, he was the Reith lecturer and great commentator in AI, but he, I think, is a thought experiment. I hope I'm attributing it correctly to him, but I'm pretty sure it's him. He said, imagine if we knew there was a fleet of spaceships coming towards us, populated by massively capable and intelligent aliens that were due to land in about 10 years' time. How would we prepare ourselves? And his point is that's what's happening. We actually have, they're not coming from outer space, but we have this remarkable, capable set of aliens coming in our direction. Harari is looking at it from a slightly different angle. He used to say, you know, it's a different form of capability. It's a kind of alien intelligence. But I think that we would be imagining with these aliens, we wouldn't be able to see inside their minds. Incidentally, we can't see inside one another's minds as human beings, what philosophers call the problem of other minds. But we assume there's something intelligent going on, not always justifiably, but we assume that, and we assume people are making intentional choices. We'd probably have to make the same assumption of aliens. But if we were thinking, what rules would we apply to aliens? What legal system would we invite them to be compliant with? What personality would we endow them with? It's not the same as a river, frankly. It's not the
same.
It's not a river.
No,
it's not the same
but
as
it's
a
good to have this
company.
discussion
Not a
already
dog.
now.
There's something very different going on.
I mean, we should not have this discussion in 10 years when
Absolutely.
the aliens are here.
And that is the fundamental point of my new book, For me, the biggest question we should be asking ourselves is, what if AGI? So AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence, which is this notion that AI systems will be able to perform the full range of cognitive tasks that human beings can perform, or at least match our performance, our output in all of these tasks. That's to say, in the broadest of terms, they're as capable as human beings. Now, already in many areas, they're not just as capable as us; they're outperforming us. But the point is, right across the full range of what it is our remarkable brains and minds can do. Now, many people say, well, of course, this is science fictional. These systems will never do that. Lawyers say this all the time. They can never do what I do. Everyone goes in for what I call not us thinking, that AI applies to everyone except us because we're different. But assuming we're not different, I think that it's fascinating to note that in 2022, if you'd asked most people in the AI development world, people developing these systems, when we will have AGI, most of them said 20 to 40 years, if ever. If you ask that same question today, most are saying 5 to 10 years. Some are saying even shorter. Others are saying that recent developments haven't been as remarkable as we've expected. But my point is that whether or not it's 5, 10, 20 years, now is the time to think, what do we feel are the moral boundaries of AI systems that can perform at this level? How would we choose to regulate systems that perform at that level? Now is the time to do that long-term strategic thinking about AI. So the ethics of AI and the regulation of AI, as they're discussed today, tend to be the ethics of generative AI or the regulation of generative AI, or frankly, the latest AI that's causing us a worry. So you hear a new development, and there's worries just now, for example, about the impact psychologically on AI users. And everyone understandably is jumping around saying, we've got to regulate this, we've got to control this. But all of this is entirely predictable if one thinks, what is AGI? And so while there are some short-term issues to be managed, we have to do ourselves the favor and allow ourselves to do some long-term thinking. And that's my plea to the legal world as well. I think there's a bonanza just now. Look at a sense of excitement that, oh my goodness, we've got a great new tool. And I'm saying to you, you're going to reach the end of the runway with that tool towards the end of this decade.
I want to finish this interview with the second question of an expert that I asked. And he's Douwe Groeneveld. He was head of legal at ASML.
Yes.
And he now has his own company, Hidde. And he had a question for you about also, I think, AGI.
Dear Professor Susskind, in your new brilliant book, you describe 4 future potential scenarios for humanity and AI, and you opt for the future where we form a joint venture with AI, peacefully coexisting next to AI, rather than a scenario where AI takes us over or where we merge with AI. And you say that if we prefer that scenario, and if we want to prevent more dystopian versions, we should enact safeguards already now. And I fully subscribe to that vision. However, here comes my question. How do we enact those safeguards in a democratic society where the majority of the people may actually prefer to be taken over by AI? Because let's face it, if we look at humanity today, we are already glued to our phones, like cyborgs. We are already consuming algorithmic drugs in increasing quantities. So how do we prevent a matrix-like scenario if people actually prefer to be plugged into the matrix?
So that's a great question. Let me explain to listeners what I had in mind here. It's the final chapter of the book, and it might sound rather fanciful, but what I am imagining is what I call the AI evolution hypothesis. And the AI evolution hypothesis runs a little like this. It says, look, our known universe is about 13.8 billion years old. Humanity's only been around for a few 100,000 years. In cosmic terms, humanity's just a blink of the eye. And it may well be that the only contribution that humanity will make to the cosmos is to develop these much more capable systems that will in due course replace us. Now, I'm not defending that hypothesis. I'm just passing along what some cosmologists, very respectable scientists, think about this. So what I tried to do in the final chapter is think, well, gosh, let's follow this through. Let's think it through. What do we think about this? And I tackle it by asking the question, to whom do we owe a duty, our current generation of humanity? Are we thinking about AI in cosmic terms? That's to say, is our duty to the rest of the universe, or is our duty simply to humanity? So it's big philosophical stuff, and hopefully readers will enjoy it, and it will encourage them to think more deeply about themselves as well as about AI. So what I say is, well, just taking a step back, I suppose there's really 4 options. One option's takeover. We just accept it. We say, look, the writing's on the wall. It might be 10 years, it might be 50 or 100 years, but in due course, these systems, in ways we can't yet anticipate, are likely to be far more capable than us. And maybe this is just part of the human condition that will be replaced. So that's the takeover strategy. The second strategy is the merger strategy, which some people talk about the singularity, where organic biological humans merge with these digital machines, creating a new kind of entity. The third is what I call joint venture, where to some extent we coexist with these systems. And there's questions, why would far more capable systems want to coexist with us? And there's answers we can give to this. But the point about joint venture is we keep a little bit of a distance, and we retain our distinctive humanity. And the fourth is termination, the idea, well, and I draw these terms from corporate law, as it were. Termination is just this idea that, well, why don't we actually stop now? Because it's pretty clear this is going to be profoundly damaging, even if it's also deeply beneficial. So I'm pondering these, and my own view, and I don't really want to attach any greater significance to my view on this topic than any reader, but my own view is that I think our future duty in thinking about this should be to the rest of humanity and to the future of this planet. I think it'd be a remarkable cosmic gamble to think we're here somehow to contribute intelligence to the rest of the cosmos. I may be simply wrong in this, and of course we can have a debate about this, but it does seem to me that if we move towards merger, then that will lead very quickly to takeover. So I call for joint venture. And I don't want to say that that's the right answer. I'm just saying that I value humanity and humans and the miracle of humanity and our spirit, or some would say our souls. But certainly when I think, and I say it in the book, when I think of the love I have for my family and for my friends and so forth, that's something that I think is worth preserving. And I don't expect necessarily that everyone will agree with me. So although the questioner seems to agree with me, I don't think we should think that our shared view is the definitive view. So what I'm calling for, as I've been calling for in this discussion, more specifically in law, is that we have a far more nuanced, informed discussion about the long term. We need to have, I think, within the next decade, public global debate about the potential impact of this technology, so we can make at least an informed choice if we decide to move towards, for example, merger rather than takeover. So I don't want my views to be held out as definitive views. What I'm doing in my work, sometimes I'm quite prescriptive and I say here's how it ought to be, but in this latest piece of work I'm more just trying to lay out and clarify all the issues and the concepts.
And it's a very optimistic view, right?
I think it is optimistic, but it's also pessimistic. And I think one of the messages of the book is that that's fine. I think what we try to do as humans when we hear about a new development is it's a bit like a football team. Do we support it or we don't support it? And I don't think AI is like that. I think you can be both, and I am both optimistic and pessimistic. Mm-hmm. Do I think we can solve many of humanity's gravest challenges? Healthcare, climate, access to justice, educational challenges using AI? You bet. Do I think it brings a mountain range of risks and threats and exposes us to all sorts of vulnerabilities? You bet. And that's why I say, and it's my running theme, that saving humanity with and from AI is the defining challenge for our generation.
Thank you for this conversation and this discussion.
Thank you very much.
It was an honor to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Legal AI Lab. With many thanks to my co-host Martijn Doornbos from Legal Mike And of course, many thanks to Richard Susskind for being our guest on this episode. Follow and subscribe in your podcast app, leave a review, and share this episode. There are many more conversations coming with leaders from the legal AI world. I'm Hidde Bruinsma. See you next time.
This podcast is brought to you by Legal Mike, the smartest AI assistant build specifically for the Dutch legal practice, thorough, intuitive, and secure. Want to discover how Legal Mike can boost your practice? Visit legalmike.ai and start today.